Joining us now on the line from London, Ontario, Carmi Levy, an independent technology analyst and journalist. And Carmi, we're always happy to have you on the program. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. So Balisillie and Lazaridis have finally bowed to repeated calls to step down, and yet you look at what the stock price of RIM did today. The market was not impressed. How come?
Well, it was the market basically is telling RIM, good try, but you didn't go far enough. They're glad that they've made the change in leadership. They've been calling for it for well over a year. They wanted Mr. Balisilli's and Mr. Lazaridis' heads. They've got them now, but in choosing his replacement, handpicking their replacement, they chose an insider. And the market didn't want that. The market wanted radical change, not conservative change. And so they were hoping for the company to bring in someone from the outside, either from a competitor, someone else in the industry, or even outside of the industry, to provide a fresh set of eyes, to really drive the kind of fundamental, transformative, 180-degree change that RIM really needs if it's going to compete. And instead, what they got was a very capable executive with great industry experience, but he's basically spouting the same words of the founders, and to the investment community, just not enough.
The new CEO is named Heins. What do we know about him?
Well, we know that he's a native of Germany. He spent almost 30 years in the telecommunications industry, most of it with Siemens AG in Germany. He's a physicist by education with a master's degree from University of Hanover, and he's been with RIM for just over 4 years, and he's essentially headed up their BlackBerry portfolio. So the smartphones that you use today, he's been responsible for them for the last 4 years. And what investors are saying basically is, if you've essentially barely moved the goalposts for BlackBerries in the last 4 years, how can we expect you to really radically change this company over the next 1 or 2?
Well, in fact, one of the first things that he said after getting the new appointment was, quote, "I don't think drastic change is needed." Was that a mistake?
I think so. I think you could almost see, as soon as he said that, the negative effect on the share value as it started to go down. I think that was the point where everyone was watching and waiting to see what kind of tone would be coming out of him. And as soon as they saw that, they realized that he really seems to be, at least at first impression, a stay-the-course kind of leader, which you know, this is a market where stay the course eventually ends you up in the ditch. This is not how RIM is going to catch up to companies like Apple and Google, who, far from standing still, are racing away, and RIM's basically staring at the taillights receding into the distance.
I don't want to overreach here, Carmi, but what does it say about the mindset of upper management at RIM, where the first thing that comes out of the new CEO's mouth is essentially the last thing that investors want to hear?
I think it says that they're possibly still a little bit out of touch with the outside world. I think they're all incredibly good at what they do. I think they really do understand the inner workings of the company, but I think if we can fault RIM for anything over the last 3 or 4 years, it's not really understanding the macro environment around the company, how the market was changing, how consumers' tastes were changing, and how their technology needed to change to evolve with that. There was always this corporate arrogance. We're RIM, we know what's best for the market around us. We know everyone's talking about and wrapping buzz around things like the iPhone and Android, but the BlackBerry is good enough. And so that kind of thinking that's basically gotten RIM into a marketing pickle to date, I think that was also at play when they were deciding who the next leaders would be. They played it safe.
Is that kind of thinking understandable in some respects, given that these guys did have the magic touch for quite a long time?
It absolutely does. At some point, you know, when you are a fantastically successful business leader and you create a multi-billion-dollar global powerhouse dominant in an industry that didn't exist when you first came into business, of course, it's very easy to get that ego big enough to not fit through the door. But technology is an interesting thing, because what got you to that point isn't going to keep you there. And so over time, that technology, that wonder technology, is going to be eclipsed. And I think the previous regime's mistake was in believing that that technology would carry the company further than it did. And when it started to lose momentum, instead of realizing it's like, ooh, we really do need to be finding something else, BlackBerry version 2, instead they basically said, we know that our technology is good enough, and we're gonna continue to kind of evolve it, but we're not going to drive revolution. And we saw it in their product plan and in their product roadmap. We're also seeing it in their leadership roadmap as well.
Let me get your view on this, because oftentimes what the street says you need and what you really need are not the same thing. Are they on the same page here?
To a large extent, no, because really the street, yes, the street is reacting to what they perceive to be a conservative management choice in the next generation of leadership. And that's entirely a fair reaction, so we are seeing some short-term hit to the share value. But what really matters here is not necessarily who's at the helm at this point in time. What matters is what he does 2, 3, 6, 12 months down the line. If 12 months from now we look at the product pantry at RIM, and it's just as bare then as it is today, and Mr. Heins hasn't delivered on some of the things that he's committed to delivering this year, then we can say, okay, you know what, you're not the kind of leader that RIM needs, we're going to drive the share price down, we're leaving on you. However, if he manages to crank up that product pipeline and introduce products that get people energized and aspirational toward the BlackBerry brand once again, then it's a completely different story. So if you're an investor, what matters not necessarily is the name on the mantle. What matters is what he's going to do over the next 12 months. So you may want to give him a bit of a grace period, see what he's capable of doing before you judge him.
So if I'm reading between the lines properly here, you don't think they necessarily had to go for the big rock star CEO in order to progress?
No, they didn't, and I think we tend to be eclipsed by the Apple experience because obviously the late Steve Jobs was for so long the penultimate rock star CEO, but really he's a once-in-a-generation kind of leader, and when you're competing against him, the expectation that you too would have a rock star leader, that's a little bit much. In reality, most of the tech space, most companies in the space are led by leaders who are for the most part anonymous, but very competent at what they're doing. So RIM can be successful with a leader who isn't necessarily a rock star, who doesn't necessarily garner the kind of exalted fandom that Steve Jobs did. I think Mr. Heins can do just fine without it.
Okay. What's job ones for Heins right now?
Job one, interestingly, he's got to engage the people who are working within the company. There's 17,000 employees. They're probably some of the, they're the elite of the elite, some of the smartest people in the space. Yet they've had a heck of a year. The company's gone through two rounds of layoffs, the first significant ones in the company's history. I know for a fact, I know many of them, and a lot of them are wondering what comes next. They're looking at the door warily, very, very nervous. Everyone's burnishing their resumes, interviewing outside. And so what he needs to do is connect with them and share his roadmap with them so that they can be engaged in the process of delivering great product to market and not protecting their careers. That's job one.
Anybody who woke up this morning and read the Toronto Star would have seen on the op-ed page, you. But if you didn't read the Toronto Star, I'm going to share a little excerpt with our viewers right now. Here's what you had to say. You're already spending around twice in a year what Apple spends on research and development. Why you're not tossing new products at the fences every month is beyond me. I think you need to ask some hard questions about why your R&D is apparently less efficient than everyone else's. You can have the snazziest marketing and the happiest employees, but unless you have something truly new and cool to sell again and again, nobody's going to care. Okay, that's your advice for the new CEO, but do you have any theories as to why RIM seems to have got so little bang for its R&D buck?
I think part of it is corporate complacency. I think RIM had become so comfortable in its leadership position in the smartphone market that it really didn't feel compelled to keep driving really great new products that raised the bar to market. Whereas in Apple's case, Apple has a new revision of its products at least once a year, usually give or take. And there's this constant barrage of updates to the products. They never let a product get stale on the shelf. It's constantly new, and you're constantly looking forward to the next one. Internally, Apple runs its research and development departments in a very entrepreneurial way. Teams of developers are responsible for product from start to finish, and they've got fiduciary responsibility for bringing that thing to market. Research in motion, they're much more separated from market realities, and so they don't really feel that push to develop it, get it out there, and make it sell. And so I think it's not just a matter of spending a lot of money, but you've got to make sure that those who are doing the research internally understand what it takes to bring it into the hands of the consumer. They've got to make them more accountable, and they've got to light a fire behind them so that that efficiency level can go up.
So this company, as it's currently constituted, is it capable of coming up with BlackBerry 2.0?
I think it absolutely is. I think despite all the doomsaying headlines over the last year, really it's a company with all of the right ingredients there. They're still there that can essentially author the company's turnaround. The problem here is that it's like they're sitting in a kitchen, they're on the shelf, but the chef has not come in and put them together into a killer dish. That needs to happen. And so Mr. Heins' challenge really is looking at these God-given gifts that the company has, these incredible talents, and saying, okay, how do we get them to work together? How do we get everyone to focus not on the naysayers that are down talking the company on the outside, but look on the inside what we're capable of. We became a global leader once. Maybe we won't become a global leader again, but we can certainly carve out a strong number 2 or number 3 position in some market and be a profitable, growing concern that people admire and respect.
I not only read your piece this morning, but I also read Margaret Wente in the Globe and Mail this morning, and she pointed to things like Jim Balisillie constantly going after National Hockey League teams and Mike Lazaridis and his other interests away from BlackBerry. And the suggestion in the column was these guys took their eye off the prize because they got so rich and famous and they decided they wanted to do other things with that newfound wealth and status. Fair shot, do you think?
I think it's fair to say that they kind of lost the script, and one of the reasons they lost the script was that they weren't laser focused on the things they needed to do in order to keep those revenue streams going. You realize that in order to be the best of the best, you have to focus on the one thing that keeps you there. And I think in RIM's case, it's absolutely fair to say that in pursuing hockey teams and in essentially building a legacy within their community, not that there's anything wrong with the things that they've created, things like the Perimeter Institute and incredible partnerships with the University of Waterloo that are the envy of institutions everywhere. Those are great, and don't quote me wrong. However, at some point, if you're spending so much time doing that and not really galvanizing your internal resources to update a product that is getting stale, you have to wonder whether your priorities are really where they need to be.
Well, having said that, do you think the folks at University of Waterloo and CG and PI are terrified right now that these guys, are going to lose their phone number somewhere along the way?
Well, I think the fear has probably been building over much of the last year as their net worth has been eroding along with the share value of the company, because then their ability to obviously fund future initiatives like this is significantly diminished. And so I don't think this really changes much. In fact, it might improve their lot because now Mr. Balisillie and Mr. Lazaridis actually have more time to devote to their non-RIM endeavors. But at the end of the day, I think they might want to look at diversifying their sources of revenue because at this point, RIM needs to focus on surviving and growing, and providing philanthropy is probably not going to be a priority for the next little while.
Bit of crystal ball here for the last 20 seconds, Carmi. Are they so far behind the 8 ball right now, delayed product launches, Apple and Google eating their lunch to a certain extent, that they're too far out of the game to catch up?
I think they can still catch up, but not to the degree that they're going to knock Apple on its back or dominate Google. They can catch up to the point that they can be a nice alternative, and they can carve out a small, unique market just for themselves. But if they play the Me Too game, they're finished.
Carmi, always good to talk to you here on TVO. Thanks so much and be well.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.